So this is Johnny's dressage at Red Hills. And you know, sometimes they just don't want to play in the sandbox. And he was quite tense here, so I come in. He actually felt okay, but then I felt like he didn't want to halt, and so I immediately knew that this was not going to be a nice, relaxing ride. He was pretty upset about just the atmosphere in general here, so I'm doing kind of all that I can to keep him contained and try to keep him coming over his back, and by wrapping around and half halting, but he just is so tense. All he wants to do is just canter. So this makes the lateral work really tough. So here I'm trying to put him in the shoulder in, and he's just so tight in his back. He doesn't want to bend. And then we have to go on the half pass, and you'll see I'm trying to keep him from breaking into the canter. So when they're like this and they just want to kind of explode, you have to try to keeping it loose. And the extendeds help. I mean, he was fairly obedient in this part. Yeah, nice and elevated, and he is starting to connect a little, but I'm still trying to get him to bend through the corners. And we come up for a halt, and he actually halted. Granted, it was for a millisecond, but he backed nicely. So when you're having kind of a rough test, a very tight test, you have to keep kind of when the bad things happen. Like here he spooks, because what you can't see is there's a big, huge spectator tent, and they're jackhammering and doing all kinds of things. You have to kind of put those bad movements out of your mind and really work to try to get the points that you can get. So here, we're supposed to be walking, and he's just not having any part of wanting to walk. So I'm trying to give him a pat, trying to be like, hey, we're done. Let's just walk. And he's like, yeah, no, I don't want to. He's a very smart horse. Kind of the hard part can be with him during the season is he knows the tests, because these tests are kind of sometimes the same at each event. So it can be hard because he's so smart and he knows where the things are. Like you'll see he'll start to want to canter because he knows that's coming, and I have to tell him no, and then he kind of pitches a fit because he's mad, and I have to just take a deep breath and be like, you're silly, canter here. And all I'm just trying to do is get him to take a breath so he'll work. So now we go into our Canter Half-Pass. He actually does this fairly nicely. I could have a little bit more shoulder, a little bit more angle. But again, I'm dealing with a tense horse, so I'm trying to get the best out of what he's willing to give me without over riding him. So now we come into the Canter Serpentines, which he held the canter very nicely. And we're coming up for a lead change, and his right to left lead change can be much tighter. As you can see, he kind of drops in his back, and I call it his scuttle change when he does that. But he's starting to relax a little bit. I feel like he's becoming a little bit more rideable. And we go into the extended canter, and then you're supposed to do a medium canter from B to E on the half 20 meters. So that can be kind of hard to show the difference between the extended and the medium. And then we come back to the collected canter at V. So he's a little disjointed in his canter. Again, tension is our demon today. So turn down the center line to do our Canter Half-Pass. He's bending pretty well in this. Half-passes were fairly decent at the canter. And after he was able to do that extended canter, I did feel like he finally started to settle down a little bit. And so now I'm coming in to where I have to do a flying lead change, but it's heading towards the tent, and this is normally a really good change, but I asked him and he was just in La La Land. He just kind of forgot what I was asking. So again, Now we turn, or no, we do an extended again from K to E, and then E to B, we do the medium canter. So I'm trying to show the difference. I only have so many choices with his frame just because he's a bit strong and he's wanting to throw his haunches a little bit there, but now we're almost done. So we come down the center line and Johnny knows where to halt, so he's going to act like he wants to halt there, but nope. We halt right there, halted square. Wasn't our best test. Wasn't our worst test, but it definitely was our worst score. So going on from that, I decided to not run him cross country and just practice the show jump. So with Riot, you can see he's quite a different horse and quite a different ride than Johnny. He is much more of a kind of, you can push him. He rarely gets tense in the dressage ring. And a lot of that just has to do because horses are like people, where they're just different. But he did very good coming down the center line. And we do our 10-meter circles. Trying to make sure he stays up. We come into the shoulder end. And again, he's still a little green for this level. I've just moved him up, but he's getting stronger and stronger with his lateral work. So you'll see every now and then he'll drop a little bit behind the pole, or he'll get a little low, or he might open his mouth, which he goes in a very loose cavesson, just because he's a pretty sensitive guy. So I like him to have the space that he needs. And here we do a medium. And he's a very powerful horse. It's really just about keeping him balanced so he doesn't kind of go too far forward. And then you want to make sure you always come back before the letter to show the transition. And as you can see there, for that halt, he kind of dropped down. You always want them, the hind legs need to be pushing up underneath. And for the back as well, I lost points because he kind of opened his mouth and dropped his head down, and then the hind end was moving out behind. So while I got a really good score on this test, it could have been even better because there were some marks that I really could improve. Like, for instance, that transition to the trot. I believe I got a 7 in it. If it was a little bit more spot on, it could have been an 8. So we go into our circles. He's very good. Could even have a little bit more from behind. This shoulder end, he was a little bit better. But again, I was super proud with how hard he was trying. As again, the lateral work for him can be a little tough. So now we move into the canter, not canter half-pass, the trot half-pass. Want those shoulders leading. So I positioned him in the half-pass, and then he's not quite strong yet for the super big step that he has to make those really nice. And we go into the canter. And now for this canter, we do across the diagonal, a short diagonal, into our counter canter. And this is actually very hard. Counter canter through the corner, and then a walk transition at A. And that can be very difficult. But he did a really good job. Held the balance, and then it did a pretty good transition. And now we move into the medium canter down the long side and want to come back before H. And on this lead, he's a little bit shorter on this lead. I need to get him to open up through the shoulder a little bit more. But he's still nice, and you can see like every now and then he's always testing if he needs to stop on the front end. So again, it's just getting him to come up off the hind end, lifting up through the shoulders. This is very good canter walk. Very good transition. And then I do the extended. Always wanting them uphill and coming back. And then we're supposed to do a trot transition at C. That's fairly decent. It could be even better. again, there's marks. Not that we were getting bad marks, it's just my marks could have been even better. In this medium, he was super good, elevated, came up off the ground, came back in the corner, down the center line, and then to our halt. I was super proud of him. He put in a really good test. We ended up being third after dressage in a pretty big division. So for Riot's 2-star course, it was pretty impressive. We had this big bounce in. We had to make sure to ride really positive. You can see I gave him a little bit of encouragement with the stick on the shoulder. But he was very bold and through that first water. Now we come down to the second water. It's a rails to a 4-stride, and he ended up dropping to the trot, but it was okay. He jumped out of good balance and then jumped over the log really well. Now we're coming up to one of the toughest combinations lots of horses were having runouts at this corner combination, and he was getting a little bit strong, so you'll see I'm trying to set him on the hind end so he lifts up his shoulders, but it's a 4-stride to this tough corner, and he pinged it. I was so proud of how good he was. He ended up really confident at the end, and we just had a little bit of time to move to 7th place. So I figured for Johnny this would be really good practice for him, because not only do we have a crowd, but we also have galloping horses cross country. And so past experiences, he can be quite a bit to handle. So I really wanted to have a good go with him today. And he was jumping really good. Really been working on keeping his shape. So you'll see I'll be sitting on him a little bit more, trying to really get him to wrap around the jumps for him, because it's very easy for him to just flatten out and lose his shape. So here I made the mistake, I think, of not really sitting him on his hocks before the corner, and I ended up having that railed to the end of the in and out. And then here he really was trying to be careful. This was actually a pretty tough course to make time on, but because I really was going more so for his experience of having a good positive round, staying in his shape, I really wasn't too worried about the time. And as you can see right there, I got a little lucky in that line. It was a 4-stride, and I ended up almost being a little bit too long in the middle. But luckily, he settled right back in, because then we had this triple. And he pinged right through the triple, and then we come to the last oxer, and he pinged right over that. So I was really happy with how he show jumped. It was actually a good round. So for Riot's round, the course changed a little bit from Johnny's, but some of it was very similar. Here we come to the square oxer, and he really jumped really well behind. And so working on getting him to come up and around, and he's just jumping really good here. Now I made the mistake, I think, again, as I did with Johnny, As we have this long area right here to kind of move along, and I didn't prepare either of them for this turn. I just kind of sat there, and it caused me to have the rail going into the in and out, which was really unfortunate. Then he jumped the rest of the course really nicely, and as you can see, that's where the course is a little changed. We jumped this oxer, and now we come to the triple. She's jumping very good. And I was really proud at how well he handled the environment. He can be a bit of a peaky, looky horse when it comes to external crowds and stuff, but he really grew up a lot this weekend and tried to be a really good professional. And we end up jumping the last fence clean, and he ended up being 8th in a very big division.